the postmodernists are famous for being skeptical of meta-narratives. That might be a defining, that was Lyotard, I believe, who coined that, although I might be wrong. It was one of the French postmodernists. And that means that they're skeptical about the idea that large uniting narratives are valid. And it's a huge problem, that claim, because the first question is, well, how big does the narrative have to be before it's a meta-narrative? Right? I mean, is the narrative that holds your family together a falsehood? Is the narrative that holds your community together a falsehood? Like, how big does it have to be before it becomes a falsehood? And so it's a very vague claim. And it's a very dangerous claim in my estimation, because I believe that, and I believe the psychological research is clear on this. What we have, our cognitive abilities are nested inside stories. We're fundamentally narrative creatures. That's how our brains are organized. And so to deny the validity of large-scale narratives is to deny the validity of the manner in which we organize our psyches. And that's unbelievably destabilizing for people. I mean, first of all, look, the simplest story, in some sense, is that I'm at point A and I'm going to point B. And that's not as simple a story as it might sound, because it implies that you are somewhere and that you know it, you have a representation of it, geographically, let's say, socially, psychologically, you have some sense of who you are. But more importantly, you have some sense of who you are transforming yourself into. And so that gives you a direction. And now that direction, the direction gives you meaning. And I don't mean that in a cliched sense. What I mean is that the way that our brains are constituted is that almost all the positive emotion that people feel, and it's also true of animals, by the way, it emerges as a consequence of observing that you're making your way to a valued endpoint. So, you think, well, what makes you happy is the attainment of something. And there is a form of reward that is associated with that. It's called consummatory reward. It's the satisfaction that you feel, say, after you have a delightful Thanksgiving meal. But that isn't the hope and the meaning that people thrive on. The hope and the meaning that people thrive on is the observation that they're moving towards something worthwhile. And that might be individually, although it really can't be because we live in collectives, but it should be collective. And that isn't optional. If you don't have a goal, a transcendent goal, say, something that's beyond you, then you don't have any positive emotion. And that's not good, because you have plenty of negative emotion. And that's the problem with fundamental claims of meaninglessness, too, in life. That it's the philosophical error that's made by nihilists, let's say, who say, well, life is meaningless. It's like, well, if you're a nihilist, genuinely, you've lost all hope. Your life isn't meaningless. It's just unbearably miserable. And that's a form of meaning. That suffering is a form of meaning. And you can try to argue yourself out of that with your nihilistic rationalizations, but that is not going to work. You need a transcendent goal in order to withstand the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune.